Paul Simon has often been called a genius of American songwriting, a man who took folk music, expanded it beyond borders, and turned it into something global. His career gave us classics that still resonate today, from The Sound of Silence to Graceland. But what many people don't realize is that Simon was never just a songwriter. He was a musical explorer, almost an anthropologist of sound. He studied genres like a scholar, dissected arrangements like a craftsman, and absorbed influences from every corner of the world. When a band truly captured his imagination, he didn't just admire them, he let their ideas transform his own. Tonight, we're looking at 6 groups who earned Paul Simon's deepest respect. These are the musicians who not only inspired him, but shaped the direction of his career, pushing him toward his most daring and unforgettable work. For Paul Simon, the Everly Brothers were nothing short of perfection in popular music. Their seamless vocal blend and heartfelt simplicity gave Simon the blueprint for everything he would later do. It began in his teenage years, the first time he heard Bye Bye Love on the radio. The sound of Don and Phil Everly's harmonies stopped him in his tracks. He spent countless hours trying to mimic their phrasing, learning how 2 voices could create something greater than either one alone. Recording engineers later said Simon referenced the Everly Brothers constantly when arranging his work with Art Garfunkel. Their influence can be heard in the very DNA of Simon and Garfunkel songs, like The Sound of Silence. Critics have long pointed out how those harmonies carried Everly DNA, even as Simon added his own poetic depth, and he never hid his admiration. He invited the Everly Brothers on stage during his concerts and called them the greatest harmony singers in popular music history. For Simon, they weren't just idols, they were teachers, proof that great artists always remain students at heart. If the Everly Brothers shaped Simon's youth, Ladysmith Black Mambazo opened the door to his most adventurous chapter. Their traditional South African harmonies and rhythmic patterns transformed his creative world in the early 1980s. A friend first handed Simon their album, Inala, and he was instantly captivated. He played it obsessively, studying every layer of their sound. But unlike some Western artists who simply borrowed foreign styles, Simon wanted to learn. He immersed himself in South African traditions, determined to understand the cultural roots before collaborating. The result was the groundbreaking 1986 album, Graceland. Ladysmith Black Mambazo's voices didn't just accompany Simon, they elevated him. Recording engineers remember the mutual respect in those sessions, with Simon learning as much from them as they did from him. That collaboration proved something powerful. True admiration for another culture's music can lead to authentic artistic growth, and it gave Simon one of his greatest creative triumphs. Next, we come to the Beatles, who represented for Simon the perfect marriage of melody and experimentation. Their ability to reinvent themselves again and again showed him that popular music could be both commercially massive and artistically daring. Simon admired their early hits, but it was albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver that truly changed him. Music historians say he studied those records like textbooks, analyzing harmonic progressions, lyrical ideas, and studio techniques. You can hear the influence in Simon and Garfunkel's later work. Albums like Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Time and Bookends carried echoes of the Beatles' boldness, though Simon always filtered those lessons through his own folk sensibility. The Beatles gave him permission to take risks, to add orchestration, to play with production, and to fuse folk with broader sounds. Their courage pushed him to expand his own artistic vocabulary. For Simon, the Dixie Hummingbirds represented the spiritual heights music could reach. This legendary gospel group showed him how voices, when combined with conviction, could rise above entertainment and touch something sacred. He discovered them while exploring the deep roots of American folk and gospel. The moment he heard their recordings, he knew he was listening to something transcendent. Their influence seeped into his own writing. Recording engineers said Simon borrowed their harmonic ideas, not to mimic gospel, but to give his own secular songs a sense of emotional weight. When he later collaborated with them, He treated the group not as session musicians, but as honored guests, masters of a craft he deeply respected. The Dixie Hummingbirds reinforced Simon's lifelong reverence for African American traditions. They reminded him that great songwriting isn't only about craft, it's about spirit. It's impossible to talk about Paul Simon's influences without mentioning Bob Dylan. Dylan's lyrical revolution in the 1960s changed not only folk music, but the entire landscape of popular songwriting. Both men came out of the Greenwich Village scene, and though they sometimes competed for recognition, there was a foundation of mutual respect. Simon admired Dylan's fearless way of turning poetry into song. Dylan, in turn, recognized Simon's gift for melody and structure. Simon studied Dylan's lyrics with care, learning how to use metaphor, narrative, and social commentary without losing emotional resonance. And though their styles diverged, Dylan often raw, Simon more polished, Dylan's example emboldened Simon to push his own lyricism further. Their friendship, laced with occasional rivalry, gave Simon a model of what it meant to never settle and to keep reinventing yourself. And finally, perhaps the most surprising entry, the musician Paul Simon admired most was his lifelong partner and sometimes rival, Art Garfunkel. Yes, their relationship was famously complicated. They argued, drifted apart, reunited, and clashed again. But Simon always admitted that Garfunkel brought something to the music he could never create alone. From their teenage years, Simon knew Garfunkel's pure angelic voice was the perfect counterpoint to his own earthier tone. Recording engineers recall Simon deferring to Garfunkel's instincts on vocal arrangements, even when the two disagreed on other matters. Songs like Bridge Over Troubled Water stand as proof of that magic. Simon's words and melodies elevated to something timeless by Garfunkel's interpretation. Industry insiders often said that despite the conflicts, every reunion revealed the truth. These two men had a musical chemistry that transcended personal differences. Simon once remarked that his partnership with Garfunkel pushed him to reach heights he could never have scaled alone. Paul Simon's career reminds us that greatness is rarely achieved in isolation. From the Everly Brothers' harmonies to Dylan's poetry, from South African choirs to gospel giants, from the Beatles' daring to Garfunkel's voice, Simon's admiration for others didn't weaken his originality. It strengthened it. The secret of his genius wasn't just what he created, but what he absorbed. And that's the lesson his story leaves us. The greatest artists are also the greatest listeners.